The mahogany dining table, once a symbol of family unity, now felt like a battlefield. Years had passed since I last saw my son, Mike. Tonight, though, he was back, sitting across from me with his wife, Jessica. "Dad," Mike began, his voice strained, "we're so glad you agreed to have us over." Jessica smiled, a fragile, almost apologetic look on her face. "Yes, Robert," she added, her voice soft. "It's been too long." I managed a tight-lipped nod, the phone call I'd received just minutes before echoing in my mind. An anonymous voice, gravelly and low, had warned me, "Your son is planning to drug you tonight, Robert. He and his wife are after your money." My heart had pounded in my chest, a mixture of disbelief and icy dread flooding through me. Could Mike, my own flesh and blood, betray me like this? So I said, my voice carefully neutral, "How have you both been?" Mike launched into a story about his work, his words flowing a little too smoothly, a little too quickly. Jessica chimed in occasionally, her gaze flickering nervously towards Mike. The roast beef sat untouched on my plate. My appetite had vanished. The wine in my glass shimmered, a distorted reflection of the unease swirling within me. "It's good to hear things are going well," I managed, my voice tight. The conversation danced around superficial topics, the weather, local news, anything but the elephant in the room, our fractured relationship and the years of silence. "Dad," Mike said finally, clearing his throat, "we actually wanted to talk to you about something important." He paused, exchanging a glance with Jessica. "We were hoping," Jessica began, her voice trailing off. Mike picked up the thread. "We were hoping you might consider helping us out financially. We've run into a bit of a rough patch." My grip tightened around my wine glass. The anonymous caller's words echoed in my ears. "Drug you after your money." Was this it? Was this the moment they'd planned? I took a slow, deliberate sip of my wine, watching them over the rim of the glass. "A rough patch, you say?" I asked, my voice calm, betraying none of the turmoil within. They both nodded eagerly, their eyes wide with a mixture of hope and something else, something that looked suspiciously like desperation. "Yes," Jessica said quickly. "It's a rather significant sum," Mike added, his gaze fixed on my face. "And what," I asked, setting down my glass, "do you propose to do with this significant sum?" They exchanged another glance, a silent communication passing between them. "Well," Mike began, hesitating slightly, "we were hoping to invest it in a business venture, a business venture," I repeated, my eyes narrowing slightly. "Yes," Jessica chimed in, "a very promising one." I studied their faces, searching for any flicker of deceit, any hint of the betrayal the anonymous caller had warned me about. "Tell me more about this venture," I said, my voice still carefully neutral. Mike launched into an elaborate explanation, filled with jargon and projections and promises of immense returns. Jessica nodded along, adding her own embellishments. I listened patiently, my mind racing. Could they really be so brazen, or was the caller wrong? Was this just a desperate plea for help from a son who had finally swallowed his pride and returned to his father? The more they talked, the more convinced I became that something was amiss. Their story was too perfect to rehearsed. Their eagerness, their desperation, it all felt calculated. As they continued to lay out their plan, I began to formulate my own. I wouldn't let them know I was aware of their scheme. Not yet. I needed to play along, to gather more information, to expose their true intentions. "This certainly sounds interesting," I said finally, feigning interest. "We need you to understand," Mike said, his voice brimming with relief. "Yes," Jessica added, her smile now genuine, unguarded. "We knew you wouldn't let us down." "Well," I said, rising from my chair, "let's not get ahead of ourselves. I need some time to think about this." Their smiles faltered, a flicker of uncertainty crossing their faces. "Of course," Mike said, his voice slightly strained. "We understand. I'll be in touch," I said, turning to leave the dining room. As I walked away, I could feel their eyes on my back, burning with a mixture of anticipation and something else, something that looked suspiciously like fear. I had to know the truth, and I would. The phone rang, a shrill intrusion in the quiet of my study. "Hello." I answered, already anticipating a telemarketer or wrong number. "Mr. Sullivan," a hesitant voice asked. I confirmed, and the voice continued, low and urgent. "I need to tell you something about your son." Mike, my heart sank. I hadn't spoken to Mike in almost a year, a rift caused by a bitter disagreement over a business deal. "What about him?" the voice on the other end faltered. He's planning something. He and Jessica, they're going to invite you to dinner." My brow furrowed. This didn't sound like the Mike I knew, even with the bad blood between us. "Dinner? What's so wrong about that?" I asked, a flicker of hope momentarily surfacing. It's not a normal dinner, Mr. Sullivan," the voice stammered, now thick with anxiety. They're going to drug you. They're going to slip something into your drink." The words hit me like a physical blow. Drug me, my own son? I felt a wave of nausea wash over me, a cold dread seeping into my bones. Why would he do that?" I managed to choke out, my voice barely a whisper. To get you to sign over the power of attorney," the voice revealed, hesitant and hushed. "They want control of your finances. They're talking about your house, your investments." My breath caught in my throat. The house, the investments. Everything I had worked my entire life to build, everything I had hoped to pass down to my children, was in jeopardy. Betrayed by my own flesh and blood, I gripped the phone tighter, my knuckles white. Are you sure about this?" I asked, still clinging to a shred of disbelief. The voice on the other end sighed heavily. "I overheard them talking, Mr. Sullivan. I work for Jessica's family. I heard them planning it all. I couldn't just stand by and let it happen." A million thoughts raced through my mind. The casual phone calls from Mike over the past few weeks, feigning concern, asking about my health. Jessica's sudden interest in visiting, her overly sweet demeanor. It all clicked into place now, a sickeningly perfect puzzle of deceit. "Thank you," I said finally, my voice heavy with a mixture of gratitude and despair. "Thank you for telling me." The caller quickly hung up. I sat there in the silence, the phone still clutched in my hand, trying to process the enormity of the betrayal. My own son, the boy I had raised, the man I had trusted, he was planning to steal everything from me. I closed my eyes, trying to quell the rising tide of anger and hurt. I thought about the holidays we used to spend together, the family traditions we had cherished. Now those memories were tainted, stained with the bitter knowledge of Mike's treachery. I opened my eyes, a newfound resolve hardening my gaze. I wouldn't let them get away with this. I wouldn't let them rob me of my life's work, my peace of mind. I would play along, pretend I was oblivious to their scheme. I would let them think they had me fooled. But I would be ready. I would have my own plan in place, a counter-strategy to protect myself and expose their deceit. I stood up, the phone slipping from my grasp and landing on the desk with a dull thud. I walked over to the window, looking out at the sprawling cityscape below. The lights twinkled in the gathering dusk, a stark contrast to the darkness that had descended upon my heart. But within that darkness, a flicker of determination began to burn. I wouldn't let them win. I wouldn't let them destroy me. I would fight back. I reached for my phone, dialing the number of a trusted friend, a lawyer who specialized in estate planning. "Hello, David," I said, my voice regaining its strength. "I need your help. I think I'm about to become the victim of a rather elaborate con." I paused, a grim smile playing on my lips, "and I need to make sure I'm several steps ahead of them." I needed to be ready for their dinner invitation. I needed to be ready for whatever they threw at me. I would not be a victim. I would be the architect of my own justice. And I had a feeling they wouldn't see it coming. There were whispers of other assets, things they didn't even know existed. They were playing a dangerous game, and they had grossly underestimated their opponent. The phone lay heavy in my hand, the dial tone a dull drone in the otherwise silent house. Betrayed. That's the only word that echoed in my mind, a cruel whisper against the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall. He wouldn't, I muttered to myself, pacing the worn rug in my study. My own son, Mickey, wouldn't do that to me. But the voice on the other end of the line, a shaky, anonymous tip, had been insistent. "They'd warned me, Mr. Sullivan. You need to be careful. Your son is planning something." He and Jessica, the voice had trailed off, leaving the implication hanging heavy in the air. I poured myself a stiff drink, the amber liquid sloshing in the glass as I continued my restless patrol of the room. Pictures of Mike, younger, happier, stared back at me from the shelves and the mahogany desk. A little league photo, a graduation portrait, a candid shot of him laughing with his arm around. A pang of grief, sharp and sudden, pierced through the numbness. "We were so close," I whispered, running a hand over the smooth wood of the desk. "What happened?" The anonymous caller had outlined a scheme, a plot well. The details were still hazy, a jumble of whispered accusations and half-truths. Something about a forged signature, a manipulated document, a way to wrest control of something valuable. The specifics weren't important right now. The betrayal was. "He needs money, that much I know," I said aloud, the words bitter on my tongue. "But to steal from his own father." I sank into the leather chair behind my desk, the weight of the situation pressing down on me. I'd helped Mike out countless times before, bailed him out of financial scrapes, offered advice, a shoulder to lean on. He'd always assured me he'd get back on his feet, that things would be different. I trusted him, I mumbled, the ice in my glass clinking softly. I always trusted him. Now this. The room seemed to close in around me, the walls lined with the trophies of a life well lived, a life I'd built with my own two hands. And now, it seemed, my own son was trying to tear it all down. The thought was a physical blow, a punch to the gut that left me breathless. I closed my eyes, trying to block out the images flashing through my mind. Mike's pleading eyes, his promises, the easy camaraderie we'd once shared. Had it all been a lie, a carefully constructed facade to hide his true intentions? The thought was unbearable. "I need to think," I said to the empty room, my voice barely above a whisper. "I need to figure out what to do." The first instinct was to confront him, to demand answers, to rage and accuse. But something held me back, a flicker of doubt, a sliver of hope that maybe, just maybe, there was another explanation. Perhaps the anonymous caller was mistaken. Perhaps there had been a misunderstanding. "I need proof," I said, straightening in my chair. "I need to know for sure the legal documents, the ones the caller had alluded to, were locked away in the safe in the basement. I hadn't looked at them in years, but now they held the key to the truth." With a heavy sigh, I pushed myself out of the chair and headed towards the door. The house felt colder now, emptier. The familiar creaks and groans of the old building seemed to mock me, whispering secrets I didn't want to hear. Down in the basement, the air was damp and musty. The safe, a hulking steel monolith, stood in the corner, a silent guardian of my family's history. With trembling hands, I spun the dial, the clicks echoing in the confined space. Inside, nestled among old photographs and forgotten keepsakes, were the documents. I pulled them out, the paper crackling in the silence. Under the dim light bulb, I began to read. The words swam before my eyes, confirming the caller's accusations, each sentence a fresh wound. The details were even worse than I had imagined. It was a meticulously planned scheme, designed to leave me with nothing. I leaned against the cold metal of the safe, the documents slipping from my grasp. The betrayal was complete. My own son, the one I'd loved and trusted, had planned to rob me blind. "He'll take everything," I whispered, the words hollow in the silence. "He'll leave me with nothing." But even in the depths of my despair, a spark of resolve began to flicker. I wouldn't let him get away with it. A plan, vague and unformed, began to take shape in my mind. He wanted a fight. He'd get one. He wanted to steal my legacy. I'd make sure he regretted the day he was born. The game, it seemed, was on. Rain lashed against the windows of my small apartment, mirroring the storm raging inside me. Earlier that day, a stranger, claiming to be a friend of my son Mike's, had called with a preposterous story. "Mr. Sullivan," the voice had said, hesitant, "I need to warn you. Mike, he's planning something you won't like." He'd gone on to describe a scheme involving drug, drinks, and forged signatures, all culminating in me signing over my remaining assets to Mike, my own son, my blood. It was ludicrous and imaginable, yet the seed of doubt, once planted, had taken root and blossomed into a chilling certainty. I paced the worn carpet, the phone still clutched in my hand hours later. How could things have come to this? Where had I gone wrong? My relationship with Mike had been strained for years, ever since the disastrous business venture we'd embarked on together. The failure had cost me dearly, both financially and emotionally. "You're reckless, Dad," Mike had shouted during our last argument, his face twisted with anger. "You almost ruined us." His words, sharp and accusatory, had driven a wedge between us. He moved out soon after, taking his wife, Jessica, with him. I hadn't seen them since. Now, this insidious plot, it felt like a final, brutal betrayal. I sank into my worn armchair, the springs groaning beneath me. The apartment felt smaller than ever, closing in on me with its shabby furniture and threadbare curtains. Everything was a stark reminder of my diminished circumstances, a constant echo of the life I'd lost. "It's not true," I muttered to myself, trying to push away the encroaching despair. Mike wouldn't do this to me, but even as I said the words, I knew, deep down, that I was lying to myself. The stranger's voice, laced with genuine concern, resonated in my ears. He'd even offered proof, promising to send me evidence of Mike's plan. I'd dismissed him initially, but now the pieces were starting to fit together. Mike's sudden calls, his feigned concern for my well-being, his insistent questions about my finances. I rubbed my temples, the throbbing headache intensifying. I had to know. I had to face the truth, no matter how painful. I pulled myself up from the chair and went to the window. The rain had stopped, and a sliver of moon peeked through the clouds, casting an eerie glow over the deserted street below. It felt symbolic, a faint glimmer of hope in the darkness that had enveloped me. I picked up my phone and dialed a number I hadn't called in months. It rang 3 times before a hesitant voice answered. "Jessica," I said, my voice trembling. "It's me, your father-in-law." There was a moment of silence. Then, "Dad, is everything all right?" Jessica's voice was soft, tinged with surprise. "I need to talk to you, Jessica," I said, forcing my voice to remain steady. "About Mike." Another pause. "Is he there?" "Yes," she replied, her voice even quieter now. "He just got home." "Do you want to speak to him?" My hand tightened around the phone. This was it, the moment of truth. "No," I said, taking a deep breath. "Not yet. I need to talk to you first, alone. Can you meet me?" "Meet you?" she repeated, sounding confused. "Where?" I hesitated, considering my options. I couldn't go to Mike's place. I didn't want to confront him directly just yet. I needed to understand the situation better, to gather my thoughts, to formulate a plan. "There's a diner," I said, thinking of a small, unassuming place a few blocks from my apartment. "The Cozy Corner. Do you know it?" "Yes," she replied, still sounding hesitant. "I know it. When do you want to meet?" "Tomorrow morning," I said, 9 o'clock. "Can you make it?" There was a long silence on the other end. I could hear faint murmuring in the background, presumably Mike asking who she was talking to. Finally, she spoke. "Yes," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I can be there." "Good," I said, a strange sense of calm washing over me. "I'll see you then." I hung up the phone, a flicker of resolve igniting within me. The darkness hadn't completely consumed me yet. There was still a chance, a glimmer of hope, that I could salvage something from the wreckage of my life. I just needed to play my cards right. I needed to be smart. I needed to be prepared. The thought hung in the air, pregnant with unspoken possibilities. The faintest hint of a smile played on my lips as I turned away from the window, the moon now hidden behind a fresh wave of clouds. The rain had started again, drumming a steady rhythm against the glass. But this time the sound didn't fill me with despair. It sounded almost like a prelude. Rain lashed against the windows of my Dallas home, mirroring the storm inside me. 3 years. 3 years since Martha had passed. 3 years since I'd spoken to my own son. The silence in this house, once filled with laughter and the aroma of Martha's cooking, was now a constant, oppressive weight. I wandered from room to room, the emptiness echoing around me like a cruel mockery of the life I once had. Martha's favorite armchair sat vacant by the fireplace, a worn throw draped over it. I ran my hand across the smooth, cool leather, remembering how she'd curl up there with a book, a contented smile on her face. She'd have known what to do. I whispered to the empty room. She always knew how to fix things, but Martha wasn't here. I was alone, adrift in a sea of grief and betrayal. I picked up a frame photo from the mantelpiece. Mike beaming at his graduation, his arm around Martha. He looked so young, so full of promise. Where had that boy gone? What had happened to the close bond we once shared? Upstairs, in what was once Mike's room, the dust motes danced in the slivers of light filtering through the blinds. His trophies still lined the shelves, testaments to a past I barely recognized. I picked up a baseball, its leather worn and cracked. "We used to play catch every Sunday," I murmured, turning the ball over in my hand. "You were a natural, Mike, a natural." The memory brought a pang of bittersweet nostalgia, quickly followed by a wave of anger. How could he do this to me? How could he even contemplate such a betrayal, especially after everything I'd done for him? The anonymous phone call still rang in my ears. "Just be careful, Mr. Sullivan. Your son, he's not the man you think he is." The voice had been hushed, hesitant, but the warning was clear. I descended the stairs, the weight of the past pressing down on me. In the study, I poured myself a drink, the amber liquid swirling in the glass. The mahogany desk, once a symbol of my success, now felt like a monument to my failure as a father. I'd built a successful business, provided for my family, given Mike every opportunity. And this was how he repaid me, with deceit and betrayal. The thought was a bitter pill to swallow. I stared out at the rain, the city lights blurred and distorted by the downpour. What was I supposed to do? Confront him? Pretend I knew nothing? The uncertainty gnawed at me. I'd always prided myself on my ability to make sound judgments, to control my own destiny. But now I felt powerless, adrift. I picked up my phone, scrolled through my contacts, hesitated. Should I call him? Could I even face him after what I'd heard? I closed my eyes, trying to conjure up an image of the son I knew, the boy who used to look at me with such admiration. Where was that boy now? Was he still in there, buried beneath layers of resentment and greed? The rain continued to fall, a relentless drumming against the windows. I felt a sudden surge of weariness, a deep bone tiredness that settled over me like a shroud. I sank into the leather armchair, the same one Martha used to love, and closed my eyes. The silence of the house pressed in on me, suffocating me. I was alone, truly alone. A faint chime startled me. My phone, an email notification. I opened it with trembling hands. It was from Mike. A simple message, just a few words. "Dad, can we talk? Jessica and I are making dinner tomorrow night. We'd really like you to come." My heart pounded in my chest. Dinner, after all this time, was it a trap? Was this the beginning of his plan, or was it something else? A flicker of hope, small and fragile, began to burn within me. Maybe, just maybe, there was still a chance for reconciliation, for forgiveness, for a flicker of the life I'd lost. I typed a reply, my fingers hovering over the send button. "I'll be there." The words hung in the air, a promise, a prayer. The rain outside had stopped, and for the first time in a long time, a sliver of light broke through the darkness. But the unease remained. What would tomorrow bring? What did Mike and Jessica really want? I knew one thing for sure. I was walking into the unknown. Rain lashed against the window, mirroring the storm inside me. The phone rang, a shrill intrusion in the quiet house. I hesitated, then picked up. "Hello," I said, my voice rough. "Dad, it's Mike," came the reply, a voice I hadn't heard in years, a voice that once filled me with pride, now laced with a nervous tremor. Silence hung heavy between us, the unspoken years a chasm we both seemed hesitant to cross. "Mike, I finally managed, my voice tight with unshed tears and suppressed rage. He cleared his throat. "Dad, I need to talk to you." My heart pounded in my chest, a frantic drumbeat against my ribs. This was it, the moment of truth. "About what, Mike?" I asked, trying to keep my voice even, though I already knew. A friend, someone I thought I could trust, had tipped me off about Mike's plan, a plan that involved Jessica, a carefully concocted story, and a substantial amount of my money. "Can we meet?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. I closed my eyes, the betrayal a bitter taste in my mouth. "Meet? After all this time, you want to meet?" The rain outside intensified, the wind howling like a banshee. "Dad, please, just hear me out." He sounded desperate, a plea I would have responded to instantly years ago, before the bitterness and resentment had taken root. Nah, it only fueled my anger. "Hear you out." "Hear what, Mike?" "Hear how you and Jessica planned to drug me and steal my money." The silence on the other end was deafening. He didn't deny it. He couldn't. I can explain," he stammered, his voice cracking. Explain how you could betray me like this. After everything I've done for you." My voice rose, years of hurt and disappointment pouring out. "I gave you everything, Mike, the best education, a comfortable life, and this is how you repay me." "Dad, it's not like that," he pleaded, his voice choked with emotion. "It wasn't supposed to be like this," I scoffed, a harsh, bitter sound. "Oh, really? Then how was it supposed to be? Mike, tell me. Enlighten me." I gripped the phone tighter, my knuckles white. "I made a mistake, Dad," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "A mistake? You call this a mistake? This is a betrayal, Mike. A calculated, cold-hearted betrayal." The words tumbled out of me, raw and jagged. Jessica, she needed the money. It was for a good cause, I swear. I could hear the desperation in his voice. But it didn't soften my resolve. "A good cause? Don't insult me, Mike. Don't you dare try to justify this." My breath hitched, the anger threatening to consume me. "I trusted you. I loved you. And you threw it all away." I leaned against the wall, my legs suddenly weak. "I know, Dad, and I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." His words, though laced with genuine remorse, couldn't bridge the chasm that had opened up between us. "Sorry doesn't cut it, Mike," I said, my voice hollow. "Sorry doesn't bring back the trust, the respect, the love that you so carelessly discarded." The silence stretched between us again, filled only with the relentless drumming of the rain. "Please, Dad," he whispered, his voice breaking. Just let me explain." I hesitated, my resolve wavering for a fraction of a second. Part of me, the part that still remembered the little boy who used to look at me with such adoration, wanted to believe him, wanted to forgive him, but the hurt was too deep, the betrayal too fresh. "There's nothing to explain, Mike," I said, my voice cold and hard. "You've made your choice. Now live with it." I hung up the phone, the silence in the room suddenly heavier, more oppressive than before. I sank to the floor, the weight of my son's betrayal crushing me. Outside, the storm raged on, mirroring the tempest inside me. But somewhere in the midst of the pain and the anger, a flicker of something else began to take root. A quiet resolve, a steely determination. He wanted to meet. Fine, we'd meet. And he would see that I wasn't the same man he thought he could so easily deceive. He would learn that actions have consequences, and I would make sure he paid for what he had done. The phone felt cold against my ear, colder than the empty space Mike had carved in my life these past few years. I hadn't expected his call, not after everything that had happened, not after the bitter words and the chasm that had grown between us. "Dad," he began, his voice thick with emotion I couldn't quite decipher, "I need to talk to you." I almost hung up. The urge to sever that tenuous connection, to protect myself from further hurt, was overwhelming, but something held me back. "What is it, Mike?" I asked, my voice flat, devoid of any warmth I once held for him. A long silent stretch between us, filled only with the static hum of the phone line. "I messed up," he finally choked out. "Really messed up." He then confessed everything, the whole scheme with Jessica, the desperation that had driven him to such a drastic measure. He told me about how Jessica had been against it from the beginning, how she'd pleaded with him to come clean, to talk to me. She tried to stop me. "Dad," he said, his voice breaking, "she kept saying it was wrong, that you'd never forgive us." My mind reeled. Jessica, I'd always liked her, seen a goodness in her that I'd hoped would rub off on Mike. "Where is she now?" I asked, suddenly wanting to hear her voice, to find some anchor in this swirling storm of betrayal and regret. "She's here with me," Mike stammered. "She wanted to be here." "Toto apologized. Put her on," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. The phone rustled, and in Jessica's voice, small and hesitant, filled my ear. "Mr. Sullivan, I am so sorry. I know we've hurt you, and I know we don't deserve your forgiveness. But please believe me when I say that Mike truly regrets what he did. He was desperate, lost. We both were." Her voice cracked, and I heard a muffled sob. "I just want our family back." Her words hit me harder than any accusation, any angry outburst ever could. Family. That's what we were supposed to be, and that's what I'd lost. And in that moment, hearing the genuine remorse in Jessica's voice, I realized I wanted it back, too. "I understand," I managed, surprised by the tremor in my own voice. "I need some time, Mike, time to process all this." I paused, the weight of years of hurt pressing down on me, but I continued, a flicker of hope igniting within me. Maybe we can talk about this face to face. The three of us." There was a gasp on the other end of the line, followed by a choked sob from Mike. "Yes," he whispered, "yes, Dad, anything. We'll do whatever it takes." I gave them my address, arranged to meet the next day, and hung up the phone. The silence that followed wasn't cold and empty anymore. It was filled with a fragile hope, a possibility of rebuilding what had been broken, a chance to be a family again. My mind began to churn, not with anger and resentment, but with a cautious optimism. I needed to think, to plan. This meeting, it had to be more than just a conversation. It had to be a new beginning. I knew I still had a considerable journey ahead, but for the first time in years I felt a glimmer of light in the darkness. There was a future again, a future where forgiveness and reconciliation weren't just empty words, but tangible realities, and I was determined to make it happen, to rebuild the bridges that had been burned, and to reclaim the family I thought I'd lost forever. This time I wouldn't let anything stand in my way. The ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall echoed the unsteady beat of my own heart. I poured myself another glass of scotch, the amber liquid sloshing against the crystal. "Reconcile," I muttered to the empty room. "After all this time, After all they've done, I swirled the scotch, watching the light refract through it, lost in thought. The phone call had shaken me to my core. To think my own son, Mike, plotting against me. He wouldn't, I said aloud, trying to convince myself. He couldn't, but the anonymous voice on the other end of the line had been so certain, so detailed in its description of Mike and Jessica's scheme. They were going to drug me, they'd said, take advantage of my weakened state to convince me to sign over everything. The thought sent a shiver down my spine. I paced the length of the living room, the Persian rug soft beneath my feet. Each step felt heavy, weighted with years of disappointment and now betrayal. Dinner, I said, the word tasting like ash in my mouth. They'd invited me to dinner, so eager, so insistent. Jessica had called, her voice brimming with false cheer. It's been too long, Dad, she'd said. We really want to see you. At the time, I'd been touched, foolishly hopeful. Now I knew better. It was all a charade, a carefully orchestrated performance designed to lure me into their trap. I stopped at the window, gazing out at the manicured lawn, the meticulously pruned hedges. I'd built this life, this empire, brick by brick, and they thought they could just take it from me. They're wrong, I whispered, a new resolve hardening my voice. The scotch suddenly felt like fire in my throat, burning away the last vestiges of doubt. I wouldn't let them win. I wouldn't let them steal what was rightfully mine. I walked back to the bar, refilled my glass, and took a long, slow sip. The anonymous caller had offered me a way out, a chance to turn the tables. They had a plan, a counter-strategy that would expose Mike and Jessica's treachery and protect my assets. It was risky, but the alternative was unthinkable. All right, I said, addressing the empty room as if the caller were still on the line. I mean, the plan was simple, yet elegant. I would go to the dinner, pretend to be none the wiser. I would play along with their charade, letting them think they were in control. But I would be watching, waiting for the right moment to strike. The caller had promised to provide me with evidence of their plot, concrete proof that I could use to expose them. They would deliver it to me at the dinner itself. A discreet exchange that would go unnoticed by Mike and Jessica. They won't know what hit them, I murmured, a grim smile playing on my lips. I spent the rest of the afternoon preparing. I reviewed the details of the plan, memorizing every step, every contingency. I chose my clothes carefully, a dark suit, a crisp white shirt, a power tie. I wanted to look my best, to project an image of strength and control. I wanted them to see what they were up against. I wanted them to know that I wouldn't go down without a fight. As the hour of the dinner approached, a strange calmness settled over me. The anxiety and uncertainty of the earlier hours had dissipated, replaced by a steely determination. I knew what I had to do. I was ready. I grabbed my car keys, the metal cool against my palm. Let's go, I said to my reflection in the hall mirror. Let's see what they have in store for me. I drove to Mike and Jessica's house, my mind racing. The neighborhood was unfamiliar, a new development on the outskirts of town. Their house was large, ostentatious, a far cry from the modest homes they'd grown up in. They're living the high life, I thought, a bitter taste rising in my throat. On borrowed time, I parked in the driveway, the gravel crunching beneath my tires. Taking a deep breath, I stepped out of the car and walked towards the front door. The porch light cast long shadows, making the house look even more imposing. I could hear the faint sound of music and laughter coming from inside. I hesitated for a moment, my hand hovering over the doorbell. This was it. There was no turning back. I rang the bell, the chime echoing through the house. The door swung open, revealing Jessica, dressed in a flowing evening gown. "Dad," she exclaimed, a artificial smile plastered on her face. "You made it. Come in, come in." She ushered me inside, her hand resting on my arm. Her touch felt cold and sincere. The house was even more opulent on the inside, filled with expensive furniture and artwork. Mike emerged from the kitchen, a glass of wine in his hand. "Dad," he said, his voice strained. "Good to see you." He offered me a hug, which I accepted stiffly. His embrace felt hollow, devoid of genuine warmth. "Good to see you too, son," I reply, my voice betraying none of the turmoil churning within me. The game was on. I allowed myself to be led into the dining room, where a table was set for three. The aroma of roasted meat and fine wine filled the air. I sat down, my eyes scanning the room, searching for any sign of the color or the promised evidence. Jessica and Mike took their seats, their faces alight with anticipation. They were so close to achieving their goal, so oblivious to the trap that was about to spring. "So, Dad," Mike began, his voice overly casual, "how have you been?" He raised his glass in a mock toast. "To family," he said, his eyes gleaming with something that looked suspiciously like triumph. I raised my glass and returned, my own eyes locked on his. "To family," I echoed, the words heavy with unspoken meaning. The game was on, and I was about to play my hand. The worn leather of my suitcase felt cold beneath my fingertips. I hadn't touched this particular piece of luggage in years, not since before everything went sideways with Mike. This wasn't just any suitcase. It held the suit I wore to his graduation, the one where he'd beamed at me, brimming with pride and promise. "Dad," he'd said, clutching his diploma, "this is all thanks to you." Those words echoed in the quiet of my room, a stark contrast to the hushed whispers and veiled threats I'd heard just yesterday. The warning still rang in my ears, the anonymous tip-off about Mike's scheme, about how Jessica was in on it too. They were planning to the details didn't matter. What mattered was the betrayal, the knife twist of deceit from my own flesh and blood. I carefully unzipped the suitcase, the brass teeth catching slightly. Inside, nestled amongst tissue paper, lay the suit, dark navy, impeccably tailored, a silent testament to a time when things were different, a time before the bitterness, the resentment, the chasm that had opened up between us. Running a hand over the smooth fabric, I felt a knot tighten in my chest. This suit represented more than just a happy memory. It represented hope. Hope that maybe, just maybe, I could bridge the chasm tonight. I wasn't going in blind. I wasn't going to let them play me for a fool. But I also wasn't going to let fear dictate my actions. I needed to see this through, to face them, to understand. I lifted the suit from its resting place, the weight of it surprisingly comforting. It felt right, like putting on armor. Not armor for battle, but armor for my heart. This time I muttered to myself, adjusting the hanger, "Things will be different." I carefully laid the suit on the bed, smoothing out any wrinkles with meticulous care. Every fold, every crease, I attended to with a strange sense of purpose. It was as if by preparing this suit, I was also preparing myself. For what exactly, I wasn't entirely sure. Confrontation, forgiveness, maybe a little bit of both. The phone rang, startling me. It was Sarah, my assistant. "Mr. Sullivan, the car is waiting downstairs," she said, her voice crisp and professional. "Thank you, Sarah," I replied, my own voice steadier than I expected. I took a deep breath, a final moment of preparation before stepping back into the fray. "Tell him I'll be right down." Hanging up, I glanced at my reflection in the mirror. The man staring back looked older, wearier than the one in the graduation photo tucked away in my wallet. But there was also a flicker of something else in his eyes, resolve, determination, a quiet strength I hadn't realized was still there. I slipped into the suit, the familiar feel of the fabric a strange comfort. It felt like stepping back into a role I'd almost forgotten how to play, the role of a father. Buttoning the jacket, I adjusted the lapels, each movement deliberate and precise. This wasn't just about looking the part, it was about feeling it. About reclaiming a part of myself I'd thought was lost. As I tied my tie, my hands surprisingly steady, a plan began to form in my mind. Not a plan for revenge. Not exactly. More like a strategy, a way to navigate this treacherous terrain, to protect myself, and maybe, just maybe, salvage what was left of my relationship with my son. I wasn't naive. I knew the odds were stacked against me, but I also knew that I couldn't just walk away. Not this time, not when so much was at stake. I picked up my briefcase. It's leather-worn but still sturdy. Inside, alongside a few essential documents, I had placed the graduation photo, a reminder of what was and what could be again. "Let's do this," I whispered, a steeliness creeping into my voice. I walked to the door, my hand hovering over the knob. One last deep breath, and then I opened it, stepping out into the hallway and towards the waiting car. The city lights blurred past the window as we drove, each street light a fleeting beacon in the encroaching darkness. I knew this night would change everything, for better or for worse. There was no turning back now. I was going to face my son, and whatever happened, I would face it with my head held high. I had a feeling this wasn't just about reclaiming my son, it was about reclaiming myself. And in a strange way, I was almost looking forward to it. The game, as they say, was afoot, and this time I wasn't going to be the pawn. The Uber app told me my ride would arrive in 5 minutes. 5 minutes to face my son, Mike, and his wife, Jessica, after everything that had happened, after they'd invited me to dinner out of the blue, after I'd overheard their plan, the whispers about drugging me, stealing my inheritance. I paced the length of my living room, the same living room I'd nearly lost, the one I'd almost signed over to Mike before that anonymous call. "Are you sure you want to go through with this, Mr. Sullivan?" the voice on the other end had asked. I hadn't been sure then. I'd been broken, ready to give up. Now a flicker of something hope burned within me. It was a fragile ember, easily extinguished, but it was there nonetheless. My phone buzzed. Uber has arrived, the screen announced. I took a deep breath, smoothed down my jacket, and stepped outside. The cool night air hit me like a wave, washing away some of the apprehension. The Uber driver, a young woman with bright pink hair, gave me a courteous nod. "Good evening, sir," she said. "Where to?" I gave her the address of the restaurant, a fancy Italian place downtown, a far cry from the greasy spoon diners Mike and I use to frequent. "It's a special occasion," I murmured, more to myself than to her. She smiled. "Celebrating something?" she asked. Hoping to, I reply, staring out the window as the city lights blurred past. The restaurant was buzzing with activity, soft music played, the clinking of glasses and the murmur of conversations creating a soothing hum. I spotted Mike and Jessica immediately. They were seated at a corner table, bathed in the warm glow of a candle. Jessica waved, a nervous smile on her face. Mike just looked uncomfortable. I walked towards them, my heart pounding in my chest. "Dad," Mike said, standing up as I approached. He looked thinner than I remembered, his face drawn. "Thanks for coming, Jessica," I said, nodding to her. "It's good to see you." She took my hand. "You too, Robert," she said. Her hand was warm and surprisingly firm. We sat down, a thick, awkward silence settling between us. A waiter appeared, his presence a welcome distraction. We ordered drinks, a glass of red wine for me, sparkling water for Jessica, and a beer for Mike. So I began, once the waiter had left. "What's this all about?" I looked directly at Mike, my gaze steady. He shifted in his seat, avoiding my eyes. "We wanted to apologize," he stammered. "For everything." I raised an eyebrow. "Everything," I repeated. He nodded, finally meeting my gaze. "For the way I've treated you," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "For the things I said, the things I planned." He paused, swallowed hard. "For almost ruining everything." Jessica reached across the table and took his hand. "We both know we messed up," she said, her voice soft yet firm. "We let our insecurities and our greed get the better of us." She looked at me, her eyes filled with a genuine remorse that I couldn't ignore. "We almost lost you, Robert," she said, "and we almost lost each other." She squeezed Mike's hand. "We don't want to lose either of you." I looked at them both, at my son, his face etched with guilt and regret, and at his wife, her eyes shining with tears. I thought about the anonymous call, the warning that had saved me, the warning that had given me this chance. And for the first time in a long time I felt a glimmer of forgiveness. "It hasn't been easy," I said, my voice hoarse. "I've been hurt, betrayed, I almost lost everything." I took a deep breath, but I continued, "I'm willing to listen." Mike looked up, his eyes wide with surprise. "Really?" he asked. I nodded. "Yes," I said. "But there are things we need to talk about, things we need to work through." He nodded eagerly. "Anything," he said. "Anything at all?" Jessica squeezed his hand again, a small smile playing on her lips. The waiter returned with our drinks, breaking the tension momentarily. We raised our glasses in a silent toast. A fragile truce formed between us. As I took a sip of my wine, I couldn't help but wonder what the future held. Could we truly rebuild what had been broken? Could we truly become a family again? I didn't have the answers yet, but for the first time, a long time, I felt a flicker of hope, and as I looked at Mike and Jessica, their faces bathed in the warm candlelight, I knew that I was ready to try. Then I placed a small velvet box on the table. Mike and Jessica exchanged confused glances. "What's this?" Mike asked, his brow furrowed. I smiled, a genuine smile this time, not the forced smiles I'd been wearing for months. "Consider it our engagement gift," I said, my voice filled with a warmth I hadn't felt in years. "A symbol of a new beginning." Mike opened the box, his eyes widening in disbelief. Inside, nestled on a bed of white satin, was the key to my beach house, the one I'd almost lost, the one I'd planned to leave to them eventually, but not like this. not under duress. Dad, Mike stammered, his voice choked with emotion. I don't know what to say. Say you'll spend Christmas there with me, I reply, my voice thick with emotion. Jessica reached out and took my hand, her eyes shining with tears. Thank you, Robert, she whispered. Thank you. And in that moment, surrounded by the soft murmur of the restaurant, the clinking of glasses, and the warm glow of candlelight, I knew that I had finally gotten my family back. The Uber driver announced, Preston Hollow. We've arrived, sir. I stared out the window. Preston Hollow. Mike lived in Preston Hollow. I hadn't realized how much that stung until I saw it for myself. Rolling estates, mansions set back from the manicured lawns, gleaming cars and circular driveways. It was a different world from the modest life I knew. A world Mike had apparently built for himself, a world he hadn't shared with me. Keep the meter running, I told the driver, my voice quieter than I intended. I needed a moment. I needed to breathe. This was it, the culmination of months of silence, of strained phone calls, of unanswered questions. Mike had invited me to dinner after everything, after all the whispers and rumors, the warnings from supposed friends. He'd invited me to his home, to this palace. I paid the driver, the crisp bills feeling strange in my hand. I walked towards the wrought iron gates, each step echoing in the sudden quiet. This neighborhood felt insulated, not just by wealth, but by an invisible wall of secrecy. I pressed the intercom button. A moment of silence. Then, Dad, is that you? Mike's voice, it sounded different, older, warier. Yes, son. It's me. The gates clicked open, and I walked through, the gravel crunching under my shoes. The driveway curved up to a sprawling, two-story home with a grand entrance. It was more than a house. It was a statement. I could almost hear Jessica's voice echoing in my memory. He's doing so well. Dad, you'd be so proud. Proud. That was a complicated word. Mike stood at the door, waiting. He looked successful. A well-tailored suit, his hair styled, a confident stance I'd never seen before. Dad, he said, stepping forward and embracing me. The hug felt stiff, formal. Mike, I reply, patting his back. This place, it's impressive, he smiled. But it didn't quite reach his eyes. Come in, Dad. Jessica's finishing up dinner. The interior was as grand as the exterior. High ceilings, gleaming hardwood floors, artwork I couldn't begin to understand adorning the walls. It was a museum, not a home. Jessica, Mike called out. Dad's here. Jessica emerged from the kitchen, a radiant smile on her face. She looked genuinely happy to see me, which eased some of the knot in my stomach. Dad, it's so good to see you. She hugged me warmly, a stark contrast to Mike's earlier embrace. It's good to see you too, Jessica, I said, meaning it. She'd always been a bright spot. Dinner will be ready in a few minutes. Can I get you a drink? Water would be fine. Thank you. As we sat in the opulent dining room, the tension in the air was palpable. The silence stretched, broken only by the clinking of silverware. As Jessica set the table, I looked at Mike, really looked at him. The expensive suit, the carefully cultivated air of success, it felt like a disguise. Son, I started. This house, this life, how? He shifted in his seat, avoiding my gaze. It's a long story. Dad, I have time. He hesitated, then took a deep breath. Remember that investment opportunity I told you about a while back, the one you weren't interested in? I nodded slowly, the memory of our argument, his bitter words, still fresh in my mind. Well, it paid off. big time, he finally met my eyes, a flicker of defiance in them. I took a risk, Dad, a big one, and it worked. It certainly seems that way, I said, gesturing around the room. But something felt off. The story was too neat, the perfect. The whispers, the warnings, they echoed in my ears. Dinner was served, a gourmet meal prepared by a private chef, no doubt. We ate in silence, the only sound the gentle clinking of forks against porcelain. The food was exquisite, but I could barely taste it. The tension was a thick, suffocating blanket. So, Dad, Mike began, his voice carefully casual. I wanted to talk to you about something. My heart sank. Here it comes, the reason for the invitation, the grand reveal. I'm listening, I managed to say, my voice barely a whisper. He cleared his throat, glancing at Jessica, who offered him a reassuring smile. I want to apologize, Dad. My fork clattered against my plate. Apologize for what? For leaving me out? For the silence, for the whispers, for everything, Mike continued, his voice now thick with emotion. For pushing you away, for not including you in my success. I was ashamed, Dad, ashamed that I needed your help, that I failed with the business before. I wanted to prove myself, to show you I could do it on my own. He paused, his eyes glistening. But I was wrong. I should have trusted you. I should have talked to you. He reached across the table, his hand covering mine. I missed you, Dad, and in that moment I saw past the expensive suit, past the grand house, past all the pretense. I saw my son, the boy I'd raised, the boy I loved, the boy I thought I'd lost. I missed you too, son, I said, my voice choked with emotion. And, Dad, Mike continued, a mischievous glint now in his eyes. About this house he paused, a dramatic flourish. It's yours. The pressed and hollow air hung heavy with the scent of jasmine as I pulled up to Mike's new home. It was a far cry from the cramped apartment he'd shared with Jessica after they first got married. This was a statement to stories, sprawling across a manicured lawn. It even had a fountain bubbling softly near the entrance. I took a deep breath and steeled myself. After everything, this felt surreal. Jessica had called a few days ago, her voice hesitant, almost pleading. Dad, Mike wants to see you. He's different now. Please come for dinner. I had hesitated then. The hurt, the betrayal, it was still raw. But something in her voice, a flicker of genuine hope, convinced me to give it a shot. Now, standing here, my hand hovering over the doorbell, I felt a tremor of uncertainty. I rang the bell and waited. The door swung open to reveal Jessica, radiating warmth in a simple sundress. Dad, she exclaimed, pulling me into a hug. I'm so glad you came. She stepped back, her eyes glistening. Mike's inside. He's nervous. I managed a small smile. Nervous, is he? I followed her through the grand foyer into a spacious living room. And there he was, my son. Mike stood by the fireplace, looking thinner than I remembered, but his eyes, once filled with resentment, held a different emotion now. Regret, maybe. He looked up as we entered, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. Dad, he finally managed, his voice thick with emotion. I don't know where to start. I took a seat on the plush sofa, gesturing for him to join me. Jessica sat on a nearby armchair, her hand resting on Mike's knee, a silent offering of support. Start at the beginning, son, I said, my voice softer than I intended. He nodded, taking a deep breath. That night after the argument, I said some terrible things I didn't mean. He looked at me, his eyes pleading for understanding. I was angry, frustrated. I felt like you didn't trust me, that you thought I was incapable of making my own decisions. And the plan, I asked, the word catching in my throat. The memory of that whispered phone call, the warning about his intentions, still stung. He flinched, his face paling. It was stupid, he mumbled, looking down at his hands. I was desperate. I wanted to prove I could make it on my own, that I didn't need your help. I let my pride get the best of me. He paused, then looked up at me, his eyes brimming with tears. I never intended to hurt you, Dad, I swear. There was a long silence, the only sound the gentle tick-tock of a grandfather clock in the corner. I looked at my son, truly looked at him, and saw the broken man beneath the facade he had so carefully constructed. I saw the boy I had raised, the one I had taught to ride a bike, the one I had cheered on at his baseball games. And in that moment, the anger and resentment that had festered inside me for so long began to dissipate. I know, son, I finally said, my voice trembling slightly. I know. Jessica stood up and came over, placing a hand on my shoulder. He's been working hard to turn things around, Dad, she said softly. He's started his own business, a small consulting firm. It's doing well. She smiled, a genuine, heartfelt smile. He wants to make things right. Mike looked up, a flicker of hope in his eyes. I do. Dad, I want to earn back your trust, your respect. I know it won't be easy, but I'm willing to do whatever it takes. He paused, then added, almost hesitantly, I even sold the house you helped me buy. I used the money to pay off my debts and invest in the business. I wanted to start fresh with a clean slate. My heart swelled with a mixture of pride and relief. He had learned, he had grown. I'm proud of you, Mike, I said, my voice thick with emotion. He stood up and came over, wrapping me in a hug. It was awkward at first, stiff and uncertain, but then it melted into something genuine, something real. A hug between a father and a son, a bridge across the chasm that had separated them for so long. Jessica cleared her throat, a playful smile on her face. Dinner's almost ready, she announced. I made your favorite, Dad, lasagna. She winked. And Mike helped. I chuckled, feeling a warmth spread through me that had nothing to do with the lasagna. It was the warmth of family, of forgiveness, of a bond rebuilt stronger than ever before. As we sat down at the dining table, bathed in the warm glow of the setting sun, I looked at my son and his wife and knew that everything, finally, was going to be all right. This wasn't just a house, it was a home, and I was welcomed back into it.